Alright, so the topic of our first video tutorial for the Bjorem Speech Sound Cues is going to be focused on a very, very important critical skill for fluent reading and spelling, and that skill is called phonemic awareness. Phonemic awareness is our ability to either in our mind or out loud take a word and pull it apart into its individual sound components, or to segment those sounds, as well as to take individual sound components and blend them back together into a word. So the reason this is so important for reading and spelling is because our emergent readers, as well as our older students with dyslexia, rely very heavily on sounding words out when they're first beginning to become fluent readers. So if they see the word cat, they may not just look at it and know, oh, that's the word cat. They're going to have to use their phonemic awareness in order to break it down into its individual sounds. So for example, if they see the word cat, they may sound it out k, a, t, and then at the end of the word, use their phonemic awareness to blend it back together and read the word cat all as a whole. On the flip side of that, in spelling, we also use phonemic awareness. When we hear the word cat and we need to write it down, beginning readers and our students with dyslexia rely on their phonemic awareness abilities to pull those letters apart in order to figure out which letters to write. So if they hear the word cat, they may identify, okay, I hear the k sound, and I know the k sound goes with the letter C, so I'm gonna write the letter C. Okay, the next sound I hear is the sound a. I know the letter A goes with that, and then finally T goes with T. So it's a step-by-step process where the children and students are going sound by sound and either blending them together for reading or pulling them apart for spelling. So reasonably, this is a very important skill that we want to be fostering with our typical kids when they're emergent readers and spellers, as well as kids with dyslexia. Impairments in phonemic awareness or phonological processing is at the core of what the dyslexia impairment is. By definition, these children struggle with being able to pull sounds apart and blend them back together for fluent reading and spelling. Therefore, the intervention we provide must include phonemic awareness, explicitly and directly. One of the first skills to work on, and I'm going to post plenty of videos working on various ways to work on phonemic awareness using the Bjorem Speech Sound Cues. And as an aside, the phonemic awareness component of reading and spelling is what got me so excited about these sound cues. It's amazing that there's a card to represent every single sound that we use in reading and spelling, and it provides a bridge for our early readers and spellers and our students with dyslexia who have not completely mapped what letters go with which sounds and how to pull sounds apart and put them back together. The sound cue cards allow for a wonderful, wonderful visual representation of what all of this is about, and it also externalizes all of these processes to the table in front of them rather than having them rely on figuring all of this out internally in their mind. Now they can see these cards and these that are representing the sounds on the table, and they can move them around and they can tap them and they can sound out one card, sound out the next card, and blend it back together. So that's just to say that I'm very excited about these cues, and it's totally going to revolutionize the way I work with my young students who may be at risk for dyslexia, or my older students who already do have dyslexia and we're still working on these early stages of phonemic awareness. All right, back to the task at hand. So one of the first tasks that I came up with these cards, and one of the first tasks that I use when I'm addressing phonemic awareness with my students, is called initial sound identification. So one of the first steps to emerge in phonemic awareness is being able to identify what the very first sound of a word is. So the initial sound in the word cat is obviously the k sound, and we know to represent that with a C. So before we get to that stage of reading and spelling, we work just on this skill, just on expecting the student to identify what is the first sound of this word. And often it's too hard to start just with that open-ended question of what is this sound? And so we back it down and start with discrimination, where we have two sounds and we can use two Bjorem Speech Sound Cue cards to represent those two sounds. Often I start with the sounds and sh, because they're acoustically maximally different. So in terms of the brain can pick up on the very different acoustic properties, as opposed to sounds that sound a lot more alike, like the p and the b sound, where there's only one feature differentiating those two sounds, and that's if your vocal cords are running. But for and sh, those are very distinct from one another. Also, there are sounds that you can elongate, which can help the student map on to what that sound is and allow them time to do the processing. So this is a very simple task once you understand what phonemic awareness is, why it's important, and why we need to work on it with our emergent readers and our students with dyslexia. All I do is pull the yummy sound card and the quiet sound sh card and lay them on the table. After doing that, I take a list of words, whether I'm using an articulation list like Little B Articulation Station, or a lot of times I'll use the words I use for spelling intervention. I use the Words Their Way curriculum, and a lot of times we'll pull my words from the back of that book. So once I have my cards pulled, I'll pull whatever word list I'm working on, put these down on the table, and very simply ask the student, which sound did you hear at the beginning of that word? So if I say, what's the first sound in moon? They can tap to the sound. If I say, what's the first sound in shoe? They can point to the sh sound. So what you notice when I'm doing this is I'm really elongating that first sound. What's the first sound in moon? What's the first sound in shoe? I'm elongating that sound to give the student time to process and be able to segment that sound out. Over time, I fade that completely and I just say the word as I normally would. What's the first sound in moon? What's the first sound in shoe? What's cool about the Words Their Way curriculum is they have pictures that they have, instead of word lists, they have word lists, but on top of that, they also have lists of pictures with no words that you can use to really get at this sound-based property of reading and spelling. So once kids have really mastered this skill, I won't even say a word or provide them a word. I will just give them a picture of a moon and ask them to do it all internally. So in their head, they're saying moon and identifying that the first sound in moon is the yummy sound. And then often I'll just have them put the picture right underneath the sound and we'll get two columns, one column with the M words and one column with the sh words. As they progress, I will move into a field of 3. So I'll keep my and my sh and I'll throw in a plosive sound or a stop like puh. And then we'll have three sets of word lists that will contrast throughout the activity. I do circulate and move through a few different sounds, but I don't stay at this stage for all however many letters, 22 consonants and 12 vowels that we have in the English language. This is a skill, and once the skill is mastered, we can presumably decide that this can work with any letter and any sound, and we do not need to cycle through every single one. You can probe that by going through a few different sounds and making sure that the skill is there and it wasn't just mastered for the sh and p sounds. You can put in a V or a T or whatever and cycle through a few to make sure the skill is solid. But I like to very quickly move on and go directly to the final sound identification. I do this exactly the same using the same cards, except this time the words have the or sh sound at the end. So like zoom, for example, and wash as an example. So that's the beginning of what we can use the Bjorem Speech Sound Cues for in terms of supporting our emergent readers and spellers, and also beginning intervention for our students with dyslexia. Like I said, this is a very important skill, and once you have an understanding of what this looks like, it's just very natural to use the Bjorem Speech Sound Cues to target this. So in the coming videos, I'll work on other things such as blending and segmenting these sounds together, blending them together or segmenting them apart for early reading and spelling. And we'll also get into things such as discriminating short versus long vowels, which is so important for the English language. A lot of our spelling patterns are based on the fact on whether or not the vowel in the word is short or long. It drives so many spelling patterns. It's a very key step in reading and spelling development. So I have all sorts of activities and ideas and things I can talk about with that. So stay tuned and feel free to contact me or anyone else at the Bjorem Speech Sound Cue card team to answer any questions, or if there's anything you'd like to see in future videos.